Let me welcome you to this special event, Making Finance Work for People and Planet through Integrated National Financing Frameworks. These Integrated National Financing Frameworks, INFFs, are a country-led approach to strengthen public and private financing for sustainable development. And on behalf of the INFF facility, which brings together UNDP, UNDESA, the OECD, UNICEF, with the support of the governments with the support of the EU and the governments of Italy, Spain, and Sweden, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this event. Integrated national financing frameworks were first introduced by member states here in Addis Ababa in the 2015 Addis Ababa Action Agenda. Then they were a concept. They were a way of bringing together all of those pillars of the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, all of those action areas behind national sustainable development plans at the country level. And they were really the main country-level innovation committed to through the Addis Ababa Action Agenda. So in 2015, they were a concept, but since then we've seen much progress in implementing this concept at the country level. Globally, more than 85 countries are using the INFF approach, many of them represented here, to strengthen financing for sustainable development. To date, we've seen 13 national and subnational governments operationalize a financing strategy. More than 50 countries implement reforms to their financing policies for public and private financing shaped through their INFF. And recent analysis by the INFF facility looked at just 17, the most advanced of those reforms in just 17 countries, and found already that there was $16 billion in new finance leveraged and more than $32 billion of existing finance better aligned to the SDGs with scope for enhanced SDG impact. So this is what we're going to explore this afternoon. Hearing from some of the countries who are using this approach, hearing from some of the partners that are supporting the application of this country-led approach, how the Integrated National Financing Framework concept introduced here in Addis Ababa is being taken forwards, and to think about how the FfD4 agenda, the outcome document and conference next year can further strengthen this country-led approach. So we have an august panel that's going to talk us through some of that. But first, let me welcome for some opening remarks, beginning with Her Excellency Semerita Soweso, State Minister of Finance from Ethiopia, to share with us about Ethiopia's sustainable financing strategy. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Excellencies, heads of agencies, representatives of UN headquarters, organizers of this event, panelists, invited guests, all protocols observed, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon again, and welcome to this important side event focused on the importance of an integrated national financing framework to make finance effective both for the people and the planet. A warm welcome to our international guests, as well as my sincere hope that you will continue to have a productive meeting and an enjoyable stay here in Addis Ababa. It is my distinct honor to address you today on the progress and the future direction of sustainable development financing and its implications for emerging economies like Ethiopia. As we prepare for the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development, it is imperative to reflect on the progress that we've made in terms of reshaping the international financing development architecture. This event, along with its preparatory phase, is crucial for setting objectives, fostering collaboration among different stakeholders, and ensuring discussions reflect global economic realities and the future needs of developing economies. Today, I would like to take this opportunity to reflect on the need for a new approach to developing financing, particularly highlighting Ethiopia's new sustainable financing strategy. As we look forward to the 4th Financing for Development Conference scheduled for mid-next year, we stand at this pivotal moment in international economic cooperation. This conference aims to address emerging issues and meet the needs of fulfilling the implementation of the 2030 Agenda, which seeks to reform the international financial architecture to better serve the needs of nations and people. In light of the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, which was progressively committed to funding sustainable development, FfD4 is expected to evaluate the progress made and address constraints in mobilizing financial resources globally to meet sustainable development goals. Ethiopia's sustainable financing strategy plays a pivotal role in this endeavor, providing a comprehensive roadmap to mobilizing and managing resources effectively. The strategy aims to establish strong, resilient funding mechanisms and will reinforce our nation's future growth and development. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Ethiopia continues to progress towards prosperity. Ensuring sustainable development financing is extremely crucial. Our ambitions necessitate a diversified financing approach that leverages a wide range of sources, both domestic and international, public and private, to bolster our economic growth and resilience. Our financing strategy serves as a comprehensive guide to realizing these goals. Today, I would like to outline the key aspects and components of this strategy. Since the Addis Ababa Action Agenda in 2015, through the progress has been made in many aspects, the 2030 Agenda, there remains, and we see a lot of setbacks in areas that have not shown significant improvement as expected. According to IMF's SDG financing tool, Ethiopia is projected to miss key SDG targets until 2053 under the business as usual scenario. Therefore, it's essential that we align our financial resource with our national development priorities and SDGs to expedite the collective development efforts that we have. Ethiopia's financing strategy was developed through a country-owned, government-led process examining Ethiopia's current financial landscape to identify our strength, weakness, and opportunities for enhancing financial flows and policy coherence. The preparation of the strategy involved a consultative approach comprising of an analysis of financial flows and their alignments with development priorities. The development finance diagnosis revealed several critical insights into Ethiopia's financial landscapes. Despite significant economic progress over the past decade, including notable increase in GDP and substantial reduction in poverty, our public-led investment growth model has faced several challenges. It's evident from the assessment that financing ambitions through public investment programs alone, primarily through domestic resource and substantially from external borrowing, has led to macroeconomic imbalance, including foreign exchange shortage, external debt distress, finance sector vulnerabilities, limited access to finance for private sector, and high inflation. Furthermore, inadequate structural transformation and limited private sector development hindered job creation and economic diversification. In response to this challenge, we have been implementing a series of homegrown economic reform programs that are aimed at addressing macroeconomic and structural issues, achieving notable success despite various disruptions. Currently, we're implementing the second phase of our homegrown economic development program, and this is expected to sustain and upscale the first phase of our reform package. And to address the persistent macroeconomic instability, challenges such as inflation, budget deficits, deficit risks, unemployment, foreign exchange shortage. We recognize that the current development financing needs are vast and necessitate a new and innovative financing framework to enable us to achieve our ambitious goals. The 10-year development plans that we have, the reform objectives, and the post-conflict recovery goals that we have in a resilient and a sustainable manner. The development finance assistance has been identified and estimated to be around 440 billion and will be required over the next several fiscal years to achieve our targets. The resource requirement exceeds current trends in public investments. Therefore, our strategy is designed to look for a way that will allow us to effectively mobilize and manage resources, establish strong and resilient funding mechanisms to support Ethiopia's future growth and development. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Ethiopia's pursuit of a new sustainable development financing model is driven by the need to overcome persistent challenges and achieve ambitious goals. Centered on the concept of the right financing, this approach will aim to invigorate innovative financing instruments across key sectors, leveraging the depth of financial capital markets. By adopting this strategy, we seek to optimize public funds by attracting commercial capital and catalyzing private investments. Our financing strategy is strategically positioned with the ongoing deep structural reforms. As Ethiopia undertakes debt restructuring and negotiates with the IMF, the financing strategy focuses on closing the sustainable development financing gap and positioning itself as a primary financing strategy for the ongoing 3 years plan that we have as a country. The key entry points include capital market development by establishing an infrastructure like stock exchange and promoting a robust bond market. Reforms in state-owned enterprise, digital transformation initiatives, and the efforts to address financing gaps for medium and small enterprise are prioritized under our financing strategy. Furthermore, by enhancing capabilities and promoting green investments, we aim to build a resilient and environmentally sustainable economy. Diversifying funding sources beyond the conventional public sector mechanisms is prioritized, encompassing commercial capital and financial tools like public-private partnerships, blended finance, investments, green bonds, and diaspora bonds. Priority investment areas include accelerating digital modernization to boost revenue collection efficiently and combat tax evasion, as well as integrating digital technologies across sectors for fostering efficiency and digitalizing entrepreneurship. Reducing the public sector footprint and enhancing efficiency and privatization of SOEs is an essential to create the fiscal space that we need and improve the returns on public investments. The roadmap also emphasizes a shift from the traditional debt-focused and a public investment-centered infrastructure investment to innovate and encourage private sector financing instruments. Incorporating sustainable finance into sector plans across sectors is also a critical component. Our proposed financing strategy architecture aims to address structural constraints by promoting resilience and aligning financial flows with long-term sustainability goals. The roadmap aims to chart long-term financial instruments alongside immediate ones, each for sectors to utilize. For instance, urban investment funds and real estate investment trusts are proposed for the urban development sector to enable sustained urban growth and development. Strategic investment funds, mining bonds, joint ventures are earmarked for the mining and petroleum sector, enhancing investments in these crucial sectors for our country. The proposed level of transformation in development of financing requires a series of changes across policy, institutions, and systems in different sectors. Establishing a robust governance and coordination framework is essential. The governance structure for implementing the financing strategy are designed to ensure effective collaboration, transparency, and accountability across government entities and stakeholders. At the forefront of this framework is the Ministry of Finance, tasked with the lead and coordinating and the implementation of these efforts. Institutionalizing public-private dialogue is also an integral part of the strategy's governance, aiming to harness private sector expertise, resource, and innovative financing solutions. The collaborative approach not only enhances for the effectiveness of implementation efforts, but also fosters a conducive environment for private sector investments and economic growth. Integrating the financing strategy with existing policy-making process ensures coherence and synergy with Ethiopia's broader economic strategies and development plans. This alignment is essential for maximizing the impact of financing initiatives, promoting inclusive growth, and advancing Ethiopia's long-term development aspirations. Ladies and gentlemen, as I conclude, I would like to urge all our stakeholders, government entities, private sector partners, international donors, and civil society to unite with a renewed vigor and shared purpose as we approach the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development. Your engagement, collaboration, and unwavering commitments are not only vital for the successful implementation of Ethiopia's sustainable financial strategy, but also for redefining the global development financing architecture and landscape. Together, we can build a resilient, inclusive, and prosperous Ethiopia, serving as a model for a sustainable progress for the world. I wish you all a successful deliberation. I thank you.
Well, thank you, Your Excellency, and congratulations to Ethiopia for the finalization of your sustainable financing strategy, a comprehensive approach to financing to helping address the $440 billion sustainable development financing gap that you outlined. Let me now welcome to the stage the Under Secretary General for Economic and Social Affairs, Lee Junhua, to share some opening remarks.
Well, Your Excellency, the State Minister of Finance of Ethiopia, Excellencies, distinguished panelists, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to the session, Making Finance Work for People and Planet through the Integrated National Financing Frameworks. As 2030 approaches, the urgency to bridge the significant SDG financing gap becomes ever more pressing. 9 years ago, in Addis Ababa, we began our journey to mobilize and align the financial resources for 2030 agenda. We have passed the halfway mark to the 2030, and the promise of the Addis Ababa Action Agenda remains only partially fulfilled. The past 4 years of the global turmoil have increased the financing needs of the developing countries and revealed the gaps and the flaws in the international financial architecture. These extremely challenging external circumstances have made it difficult for countries to progress and to mobilize the sufficient finance and investment for the SDGs. This is why the next year's fourth conference has to deliver ambitious agreements on scaled up the financing and the architecture reform of the IFI. Well, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, for enhanced financing investment to translate into concrete SDG progress at the national level, countries must have their own strategies and plans in place. Today's discussion focuses on the role of the integrated national financing frameworks in shaping national-level strategies and plans and providing an effective landing place for scaled-up the international support. Introduced in Addis Ababa, INFFs are a simple idea. They help countries to incorporate financing in their national planning cycles and ensure that all financing policies to take the SDGs into account. Today, over 80 countries are using INFFs to invest in key SDG sectors, leverage new finance, and enhance the SDG alignment of their budgets. Crucially, these solutions are designed and implemented through the country-led processes guided by the Ministry of Finance. UNDESA is proud to support this effort, together with our partners in the INFF facility, UNDP, UNICEF, and the OECD. We look forward to the further strengthening of our collaboration with countries such as Ethiopia, and to bring the lessons learned from your experiences to the preparations for the FfD4. As we prepare for the next year's conference, I encourage you all to think collectively about how we can make the best use of this country-led bottom-up effort across the many countries to develop the financing strategies and also implement this. We have a great opportunity to further strengthen the country ownership and leadership and build a more effective financing architecture at the national and global levels and at their intersections. I look forward to starting this discussion today and wish you a fruitful and insightful session. I thank you.
Well, thank you, Under-Secretary General, for those opening remarks and for that encouragement to think about how we can use this bottom. So let me now introduce the panel that we have with us to discuss this further. From my right to my left, we have Antti Karhunen, who's the Director for Sustainable Finance, Investment and Jobs from DG INPA in the European Commission. We have Binta Jeng, who is the first Secretary from the Gambian Mission to the United Nations. Sergio Colina, who is the Director General for Sustainable Development Policy in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Spain. Eric Korsgren, who is the Deputy Head of the Department for Partnerships and Innovation from CEDA. Shari Spiegel, who is the Director for the Financing for Sustainable Development Office in UNDESA. And Ali Malik Yakubu, who is the Chief Economist from the Ministry of Finance in Nigeria. So a fantastic panel to discuss this further. And let me kick off with a question for you, Sergio Colina, Director General from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Spain. As we know, Spain will be hosting the FfD conference next year. Spain is also a partner to the INFF facility supporting this country-led approach. So to kick us off with the panel discussion, can you tell us how you see this integrated national financing framework approach being used to advance solutions for financing at the country level for the SDGs, for climate, for gender equality, and how you see the FfD4 conference next year reinforcing and furthering this approach? Thank you.
Thank you, and please allow me to start by also thanking the government and the people of Ethiopia for the hospitality and the organizers of this special event for the occasion to share our views, our experience on this very relevant initiative. So, of course, Spain is deeply grateful for the support of all UN members to host next year the 4th Financing for Development Conference. We are honestly convinced that the conference represents a significant opportunity for the international community to agree on ambitious and politically viable solutions to overcome some of the most pressing obstacles and challenges that we face collectively and that are hindering the implementation of the SDGs. As you know, the Addis Ababa Action Agenda included a reference to INFFs, which has proven to have a great potential since then, and also with the momentum provided by other important initiatives such as the Secretary General's stimulus package. We have seen how integrated national financing frameworks have begun to take shape and substance in around 85 countries. So over the years, we have also witnessed in very practical terms their potential for positive impact on countries' financing strategies that lead to effective reforms and contribute to mobilize all national and international resources towards financing the SDGs. And I would like to underline that double dimension of INFFs, the national and the international, because we believe that it is a tool really designed to bring this very global agenda of financing for development to very specific country-specific situations. So it's a very, very powerful link between an international approach looking for coherence and better alignment with national and subnational realities that we need to address through financing for development. So at the national level, INFFs can ensure that all investments are aligned with national priorities, guarantee that these investments provide protection to populations during crisis, but also build on structurally sustainable development policies, and therefore deliver long-term benefits based and anchored on the national sustainable development plans and programs. In order to ensure that, of course, INFFs must prioritize the integration of SDGs into the national budgetary processes, and helping, therefore, to mobilize and align fiscal policy with Agenda 2030, and thus guiding public and private investments and providing financial market incentives towards sustainability goals. To build a little bit on that, to be more specific, please allow me to share some thoughts on some elements that we consider in our experience to be key to really explore all the potential of INFFs. First of all, we think it can be and is an interesting space also for exploring measurement indicators that go beyond GDP. That's also a discussion that we're having in the framework of the Financing for Development agenda. Second of all, Spain always underscores the importance of the localization approach in everything that we do globally, but also in terms of financing for development. Only promoting this territorial perspective, we can ensure social cohesion in all places, in all countries, and therefore we really think it's important to enhance this multi-stakeholder approach that incorporates, of course, subnational governments and local and regional governments as much as possible, and that incorporates at least this localized approach to the implementation of SDGs to contribute to the acceleration of their implementation. But not only local and regional governments, we also think it is an appropriate space to also move forward with incorporation of other actors, private sector, civil society to planning and programming processes that then help enhance countries' capacities to build the strategic frameworks for SDGs, but also international partners to really align our programs, our bilateral and international cooperation in a very strongly anchored, aligned, and appropriated manner. To begin to end up with, I would like to stress that the INFF facility has helped us also channel this support that we have been that we understand important, and we've been accompanying the program for the last years. I think it's the case of Ethiopia that was presented recently provides an example of how INFFs can align with national development plans and then appeal to all of us also to align our contributions to those purposes. And all of these, all the elements that I've mentioned, I think it's clear that completely connect with the discussions we're having in broader terms in the framework of the FfD agenda. So therefore, I really think we really consider INFFs have one specific contribution for the discussions we will be having in the 4th international conference that we will be hosting next year. So congratulations again to Ethiopia, and looking forward to see you all in Sevilla in July next year. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sergio, and thank you for highlighting those key elements that you emphasized, looking beyond GDP and thinking about measurement of financing and financing impact, the localization and territorial approach, and the multi-stakeholder nature. And as you said, the INFF is a tool designed to bring the global agenda to the specifics of the context at the national and at the subnational level. We've heard from Ethiopia already. Let's now turn to Ali Malik Yakubu, who's the chief economist from the Ministry of Finance in Nigeria. And Mr. Yakubu, Nigeria was one of the first countries to launch its INFF financing strategy, bringing together the medium-term expenditure framework, the medium-term revenue strategy, fiscal federalism, and private finance policy. We're now some 18 months or so on from the launch of that strategy, and I understand that it's catalyzed innovation across tax, private investment, different aspects of financing, both at the national and at the state level. So could you tell us a bit more about that, how the financing strategy is advancing reform in your financing policies, where this is leveraging some outcomes already, and how you see that the FfD outcome document could help Nigeria to further accelerate implementation in the future?
Thank you, Mr. Tim, for the introduction. And before I proceed, I would like to express my gratitude to the government and people of the Ethiopia for the excellent facilities put at our disposal since our arrival in the beautiful city of Addis Ababa over the past 2 years, two days. And Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to present to you the implementation status of the INFF in my country, Nigeria. Of course, you know, following the contractions and even losses that tailed the unhealthy global development in the global economy, Nigeria had the need to take very proactive steps to address its macroeconomic imbalances. And then we saw the INFF as the next available flight, and we boarded. Then Nigeria, as Tim pointed out, was one of the first countries to launch its INFF with great enthusiasm and expectations. But along the line, there was a general election in 2023 with the government decision to front-load very bold reforms, and that actually slowed down the initial momentum for the program because of the impact of the reform, and then the need for the time lag needed for the new government to settle in and then fashion out the policy direction. Nonetheless, on the rebound, the program has picked up, and then we have recorded a couple of milestones in its implementation. But in Nigeria, the SDG financing gap is estimated to be about $10 billion annually. And to fill this gap, Nigeria is Nigeria's financing strategy is developed as an umbrella for the medium-term revenue strategy and then the expenditure framework and fiscal federalism and the private sector reforms. The INFF approach adopted targets to expand the envelope for SDG financing and also enhance the sustainable development impact of public and private financing at both the national and the sub-national levels, to address urgent development needs. And the financing strategy also brings together the country's medium-term expenditure framework, and then the medium-term revenue strategy, as well as the fiscal federalism framework, and aiming to strengthen tax administration and policy. The government is also targeting an increase in revenue to reach about 15% of GDP, as opposed to the current 10% revenue to GDP ratio. And then, the petro-fiscal subsidy removal policy of our government actually came with a lot of unintended outcomes that have impacted on livelihood and then living conditions. And about then, it was necessary because we find out that before now, what the government was spending on subsidy payment exceeded what we spent on education, health, and infrastructure, all three combined. So, and then about $9.5 billion was saved by that singular policy of subsidy removal in 2023. All of this were targeted towards SDG project financing. Then there's also the forex management reform undertaken by the government. And like I said, this was having unpalatable consequences on livelihood. And then in order to cushion this effect, the government has undertaken a lot of social protection programs, including the conditional cash transfer to provide about 15 million with a household with about 75,000 every month. And it is expected that this program will also be extended to cover more households. Of course, this is a very huge task for Nigeria, which as a country we cannot achieve on our own, so we require partnership. And in this regard, the World Bank has stepped in with a program of about $2.5 billion captured under the economic stabilization to enable transformation, research, development policy financing program, and the Nigeria Accelerating Resource Mobilization Reforms, and the program for results. All of these are SDG aligned. Basically, the two programs, the Nigeria Accelerating Resource Mobilization Reforms and then the program for reforms for results will complement domestic efforts to provide immediate financial and technical support to Nigeria's urgent needs to stabilize the economy and then scale up support for the poor and most vulnerable in our society. Further, improvement in tax auditing capacity, for example, has enabled more than $30 million in increased revenue collection alongside the ongoing effort to digitize tax administration systems. The shift from one-year fiscal plan to multi-year perspective, then alignment of expenditure with the 8 SDG priorities, enhancing the contribution of institutional investors and pension funds in SDG financing and leveraging remittances and diaspora investment. Reform policy in sectors such as artisanal and then small-scale mining and advance potential future green bond issuances at subnational levels. Indeed, more than half of the action in Nigeria's financing strategy focus on private finance and then improving the enabling environment and stimulating SDG-aligned investment projects. Also, efforts to unlock capital include, for example, the development of a $175 million pipeline of investments in SDG investment, brokering across sectors including healthcare, agriculture, and finance, which have to date already raised about $5.7 million in new investment. Enhance transaction advisory support to women and youth-led micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, and green businesses unlocked approximately $5.3 million in assets for SME in 2023. Then a blended finance and public-private partnership are being used to scale up investment in key areas and expand the impact of capital by ensuring enhanced access for the most marginalized and furthest from development sections of our populations. Also, the subnational government of Nigeria has also committed to INFF and their ongoing public finance initiatives in all the 36 states of the Federation and the FCT to establish capacity to deploy SDG-aligned financial instruments. For instance, there is the case of Gombe State in the northeastern part of Nigeria, which, as part of locally driven financial reform effort, recently organized an investor roundtable and the establishment of an investment facility, which resulted in 2 companies signing MOUs for an investment valued at 14 billion naira, that's equivalent to about $9 million, with the potential to create over 2,000 jobs. In addition, Gombe State Investment Promotion Agency has been established, with the state government issuing a 30 billion naira green bond, that's about 19 million, on the Nigerian Stock Exchange in February 2024. The state government has also outlined plans to raise an additional 15 billion naira to bolster vital infrastructure in projects in the state. Well, Gombe State is one of the 6 states of a subnational government in Nigeria that with their subnational development finance assets and the INF action plan geared towards investment promotion are ongoing, underscoring the increasing momentum towards impactful development initiatives at local levels. Other states, including Jigawa State, Zamfara State, Kebbi State, have recognized the best practice of these initiatives and are towing the line at advanced level of preparations, including consultation with the Nigeria INFF Steering Committee, domiciled in the Prime Minister of Finance. Also, other ongoing financing dialogue between policymakers, the private sector, and crucially, representatives and advocates for the most vulnerable are a critical foundation for innovation and accountability, ensuring that the financial system enhances sustainability and inclusivity. Well, one fascinating feature of the INFF is its tremendous scalability potential and scope for social development impact. It is important that countries recognize the extensive fiscal space underpinned by the INFF and then explore them to deliver on development targets and progress. The Ethiopian crisis-sensitive financing strategy, which highlights how to align financing across humanitarian development and peace priorities, is a very good reference point for many of us. Then the diverse and varying experiences shared in this gathering over the past 2 days build a consensus around the value of country-led, impact-oriented, and holistic financing strategies. They charge countries to develop more proactive and innovative homegrown initiatives to advance their development frontiers and catching up with the priorities of the SDGs, including gender equity, poverty eradication, climate action, nation, environment, and of course, human capital development. It is important in Africa that we work to promote sustainable agriculture, which tackles hunger and poverty, but at the same time does not damage the environment. The INFF could stand out as one of the clear successes of the Addis Ababa action agenda, but there's need for bolder reforms and efforts to address financing and implementation gaps in a more coordinated way, both at the national and international fronts. In this regard, it cannot be overstressed that the time has come for goodwill statements to really translate into goodwill actions. The challenges that confront us have become quite concerning. The first approach of the end of the 2030 agenda, and underscores the importance of inclusive and participatory processes for development, which lends credence to the assertion that development results are achieved when everything else works well together. In terms of, it is important that we also look at the underlying reason for the call for the reform of the international financial architecture. You look at it that the LDC countries and communities still operate only on the margins of global trade, thereby limiting their ability to build resilience. Consequently, international trade policies need to facilitate further opening up of international markets for exports and also foster progress in the process of trade liberalization. Ensuring the consistent approach to development is key, be it in terms of trade, defense, security, and the environment, agriculture, and finance. Also, there is then the debt sustainability challenge, climate finance disparities, and significant gaps in gender equality, the dearth of reliable quality data and statistics on development indicators, as well as inadequate or weak social protection platforms across many countries of the third world. Thus, informing the case for the reform of the IFA as a matter of absolute necessity, as we prepare for the FfD4 to ensure that engagement between LDCs and donors foster cooperation in dialogue, negotiation, coordination, and pursuing mutual benefits and shared responsibility and adherence to international standards. So the reform of the IA is necessary. It's needed to strengthen multilateral development banks and enhance debt sustainability and transparency, and then improve access to credit for developing countries. We'll make a case for the launch of a new financing development initiative to support vulnerable countries, such as debt for climate action and poverty eradication, and then bridging inequalities, especially for countries that have shown strong commitments in this regard. And then promoting and helping countries strengthen abilities for better mobilization of domestic resources, as well as the understanding and application of innovative financing instruments, including blended finance, green bonds, and impact investing is also called for. Then finally, it's also important to commit to improving integrity standards, limiting opportunities for corruption, and then strengthening compliance programs. I mean, in this regard, a universal action is needed to build strong institutions in our member states to tackle corruption in all its forms, followed with adequate financing and keen interest in the evolution and assessments of development pathways, and to improve business environment for small and medium-sized enterprises. I think I'll stop here. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Yakubu. And there was a lot there in what you said. I think you touched on the INFF in relation to macro imbalances, subsidy program, and social protection tax. You talked about half of the financing strategy being focused on private finance and some of the investment pipeline work, as well as some of the momentum at the state level in private investment, in green bond issuance. Truly a comprehensive approach, and as you said, with scalability potential for impact. So let me turn now to Shari Spiegel, and Director of the Financing for Sustainable Development Office, although I'm sure you need no introduction. You were integral to the process last time around as the Addis Ababa Action Agenda was agreed, where member states first introduced this comprehensive approach. How do you see that this has moved from the concept to implementation? How is DESA working to support these country-led INFFs, and what do you see as the priorities looking ahead to next year?
Great, thank you so much, and really interesting to hear the country examples. I think that, as has been mentioned, INFFs came out of the Addis Ababa Action Agenda. They are really a very simple tool. It's just a question of integrating. What we noticed actually in the run-up to Addis was that as countries were beginning to implement sustainable development into their national development strategies, most of those strategies, very few of them actually had clear financing plans associated with them. So one of the discussions as we were in the preparation for the Addis Ababa Action Agenda in the run-up to 2015 was to try to come up with a strategy that countries could use to better integrate financing into their sustainable development strategies, and at the same time to also think about how do they how should countries finance their strategies? But second, what are the trade-offs across different policies, and how do different policies affect different aspects of sustainable development goals? And one of the really interesting examples would be in private finance, where the recommendation is usually to deregulate, to bring in more private finance, but many of those regulations are there for a reason. They could be environmental reasons or social reasons, and that you need to understand and think about those trade-offs in determining the policies. So the idea was, one, to think about how does one raise financing for the need for the sustainable development objectives. The second was to look at trade-offs and what does this mean in an SDG context, and finally to incorporate risk. So it was interesting, 2015, we hadn't yet seen the real growth of systemic risks that's become part of the discussion now. But nonetheless, one of the main points of INFFs was to think through what risks are there and how does one build risk and resilience into the strategies. I think the other really important part, going back to 2015, which is really wonderful to hear the story from the example from Nigeria, for example, is that these have to be country-owned. So we had seen many examples of attempts for countries to have country plans that were not country-owned, that might have been led by the donors, by others, and that ended up not being sustainable over the long term. And so there was a real understanding that these had to be country-led and country-owned plans. And again, the example of Nigeria, to see that it's really the government with the people driving forward these plans is exactly what the thinking was. So I think here we are 9 years later, and it's a really excellent time in the run-up to the next conference to be thinking about, to look at the examples, to look at the challenges that some countries have had. I think we need to do that, and to also look at the successful stories, and to try to understand what we can take away to this, to bring INFFs 2.0 maybe to the next level as we move forward in the next conference. From DESA's side, we've done a lot of work working with the facility, with our partners in UNDP and others, and with many on the podium right now. Our work has really been to support a lot of the analytical work that supports the INFF process. We've published 12 technical guidance documents. We've launched 3 INFF e-learning courses. We've trained hundreds of officials and stakeholders on financing frameworks. We are currently developing additional guidance on specific areas such as infrastructure finance, sustainable finance, and macro fiscal frameworks. And we're going to be launching the INFF Training Hub in 2024. From DESA's perspective, we try very hard to bring together the analytical work with the country experiences. All of this work is continuing to develop. Nothing that we produce is just a document. It's all meant to be live documents that are continually updated as we learn more from country experiences. I would say that something that we've thought about a lot, and I guess I gave the example of the trade-offs with private finance, is that it's never just, if we're talking about infrastructure, we're not just writing guidance on how do you finance infrastructure. There's a lot of that out there. We're writing about what does that mean within a holistic strategy. So it's not just your typical thinking about where does the money come from, it's where does the money come from and how does that fit in with a country plan that goes beyond just one specific area. So I think that the big questions that we to really look forward to now is the role that INFFs can play going forward. I think that, again, the Nigeria example was really interesting because to really see that it hit on so many of the action areas in the Addis Ababa Action Agenda. So starting with domestic resource mobilization, but private finance as well, and then the issue of development cooperation. So it's one of the, certainly being able to have a really strong country plan that highlights where financing is needed most is a really important, could be a really important tool to bring to donors to share and to work together to achieve a country's sustainable development goals. So I think that that's one of the really exciting places that INFFs can add value. And I say that in part because as we're talking, as all of you know, there are many, many of these processes that are happening across the system. So we have the MDBs working on country platforms. There are many of these different types of processes. But one of the really interesting issues is if you talk to everybody when we talk about the country platforms as an example, every conversation I've ever been in gets down to that these will only be successful if countries have country-owned plans that they can bring to the platforms. And so I think that 2025 is a time to bring together these different strands of INFFs, country platforms, and some of the other planning processes that are happening, and see if we as an international community can try to bring them together to make them really country-owned and to tie support to them, and really working with partners beyond those of us in the facility so far, but also working, we've already worked with the IMF on these, particularly on some of the domestic resource mobilization issues, to really work more closely with other partners, the multilateral development banks in the areas that they all focus on. So I really look forward, I think, to the next phase of this, and really looking at this time as 2024 and the beginning of 2025 to reevaluate where are we, and to see how we can take these forward to have even more impact and more importance and meaning going forward. So thanks so much.
Well, thank you so much, Shari. And you talked about INFFs from 2015 to INFFs 2.0 looking forwards. You talked about financing, not in and of itself, but within a holistic financing strategy, thinking about risk, thinking about trade-offs across different areas, thinking about how INFFs can be a platform for bringing together country platforms and other processes at the country level. And we'll look forward also to the launch of the INFF Training Hub later this year as well. Let me now turn to introduce Eric Korsgren, Deputy Head of the Department for Partnerships and Innovation at CEDA. And CEDA has been a long-standing champion of INFFs, a founding partner to the INFF facility, and a leading driver of work on financing from SDG sovereign bonds, with recently launched guidance that UNDP and many global investors also contributed towards, leading on private finance with the Global Investors for Sustainable Development Alliance, on guarantees, and I think also a partner that's mindful of the balance between prioritizing transactions, but also the underlying institutions that can continue to sustain those transactions into the future. So from your perspective, Eric, please tell us how CEDA is supporting these country-led INFFs, and how you see the FFD agenda strengthening the approach into the future.
Thank you, Tim. I will do that, but let me first congratulate Ethiopia for the presentation of their financing strategy. I found it really thrilling. It happens as that I worked in Ethiopia about 20 years ago as head of the Swedish Development Corporation. And Ethiopia, you had really strong poverty reduction strategies already at that point of time. With this robust financing strategy, I am very optimistic that we will see even more transformative change now in the near future, fighting poverty and financing the climate. And also Nigeria, thank you very much for sharing your valuable examples. Concrete results from implementing an approved financing strategy. I found it thrilling. And you also spoke about how the INFF can be made relevant, both at the national and subnational level. Really inspiring to listen to you. Okay, Sweden has been a supporter of the work with the integrated national financing frameworks since the official launch of the INFF facility in 2022. And we do that because we strongly believe that INFF can advance a more holistic approach to financing. They can enable and scaling both public and private resources for development. They can create a platform for meaningful and efficient engagement and partnership with stakeholders, and thereby create the broad-based country ownership and political backing that is absolutely necessary. And finally, lay a foundation for necessary institutional development to scale financing, both public and private. The last point is important. A solid INFF can both identify institutions and needed institutional strengthening that are a prerequisite for transformative change. An INFF can also make sure that expected impacts, priorities as gender equality, social and economic rights, employment, the climate, biodiversity, etc., are the starting point for the strategy, not the financing itself. I am convinced that a country INFF can help both prioritize and sequence necessary reforms, and thereby play an important role for investor confidence, which is truly important. At the global level, reform of the international financial architecture is high on the agenda. We discussed that at length yesterday and this morning. I believe that such reforms will only be possible if there is a mirroring, enabling institutional environment also at the country level, as Chari and my colleague from Spain also spoke about. Okay, I'm happy to see that INFF country processes have accelerated the last 2 years, and that is, of course, very timely. We are all aware of that we are off track in financing the SDGs, and that there is an urgent need for scaling both public and private resources. INFFs are important for this, because they have shown that they can relatively quickly enable both more efficient use of existing resources and mobilization of additional resources. 16 billion so far has been reported, isn't it? Domestic public resources remain the foundation for country-led efforts for sustainable development. Partner countries are, of course, responsible for designing and implementing reforms to, for example, strengthening tax collection and to fight corruption in their countries. For this, they can find fit-for-purpose support from the INFF facility. Donor partners, on the other hand, we have the responsibility to support such reforms. And for this, Sweden is, among many other things, part of a Team Europe initiative to strengthen domestic resource mobilization in Africa. But private sector mobilization is arguably relatively more off track. Private sector financing and increased trade are the flows that have deviated the most from the 2015 expectations. Therefore, Sweden aims at being a partner in mobilizing private capital, with an ODA budget well exceeding the 0.7% of GNI, and with a guarantee frame of $2.6 billion and other private sector instruments, we can lift off risk and enable private investments in sustainable development that otherwise would not have taken place. Last year, we generated almost $4 billion in mobilized capital with a very small cost for ODA. This brings me to partnerships. We will never achieve results at the pace and scale we need without strong partnerships, and that includes partnerships with the private sector. Tim, you mentioned an INFF-related example of such partnerships in how you at UNDP facilitated dialogues between INFF countries and the Global Investors for Sustainable Development Alliance to explore SDG sovereign bonds. And I'm also so happy to note that, the GISD Alliance has accepted, together with ICC, to co-lead private sector engagement throughout the FfD4 process. A truly important dialogue that must be well reflected in the FfD4 outcome. Finally, Sweden is committed to the principles for effective development cooperation. These principles are equally important when working with financing for development as they are when working with other forms of development cooperation in order to ensure quality and impact. The 4 principles: country ownership, a focus on results, inclusive partnerships, and transparency and mutual accountability will be key as we scale our financing ambitions. INFFs build on these principles and ensure that the principles are followed. I look very much forward to continue the dialogue. I'm excited to hear about Shari's views and thinking about INFF 2.0, bringing in an even stronger way all partners. I look very, very much forward to that. Thank you, Tim. Those were my reflections.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Eric. And you've touched there on a lot. You touched on institutions. You talked about domestic revenue mobilization, SDG sovereign bonds, private investment and effective development cooperation. And I think you also made the crucial point around gender equality, climate, biodiversity. These are the starting points and should be the starting points for financing, not the end points. And so with that, let's turn to our colleague Binta Jeng, the first secretary from the Gambian mission to the UN. And Gambia, I understand, has recently launched their medium-term development plan, a green and economic recovery plan, and is also a climate leader with an NDC that is pushing already towards a 1.5 degree aligned pathway for the country. And financing will be crucial to the realization of both those plans. I think the Gambia is also very much feeling the context that we've been discussing a lot today and yesterday around the debt insustainability issue. And I think public debt repayments account for 40% of government revenues in the Gambia, limiting the ability to address food security, poverty, or invest in productive capacity. So within this context, I understand you're developing and setting out an integrated national financing framework using the approach to develop a financing strategy for your national development plan and climate objectives. So if you could tell us a bit around the financing priorities for the Gambia within the INFF, and again, how you see the FfD4 conference and outcome strengthening this country-led approach. Thank you, Binta.
Thank you, Tim, for the opportunity to discuss Gambia's financing priorities within its INFF. I would like to start by acknowledging the significant progress the Gambia has made in developing its INFF, which is a crucial step towards achieving the country's sustainable development priorities and boosting domestic revenue mobilization. However, the fact that debt services cost now exceeds 40% is a pressing concern that needs to be addressed. In terms of our experience, the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs initiated the INF last year, engaging multi-stakeholder dialogue with government, private sector, civil society, IFIs, and development partners. The INF supports the new recovery-focused national development plan launched earlier this year by advancing sustainable development through a coherent financing approach. Notably, Gambia is one of the 86 countries that have adopted the INFF, and the framework has updated development financial assessments from 2017 to 2018. The INFF has identified new financing needs and opportunities, updated financial gaps and priorities, and support the government's second NDCs, which was rated as the sole NDC dedicated to achieving the ambitious Paris Agreement goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. The NDC aims to effectively address pressing environmental and socio-economic challenges whilst fostering resilient recovery anchored on Gambia's 2050 climate vision. The INF has also updated the financial gaps and priorities, and the NDP 2023 to 2027 faces an 80% funding gap totaling to $3.4 billion, impacting SDG acceleration and requiring innovative solutions. The plan addresses key challenges through 7 strategic pillars, including resilience, governance, reforms, and human capital development. The RF NDP was led by the Directorate of Development Planning in the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Finance, and supported by the UNDP with consultations from the EU, IMF, and the World Bank. The Gambia's priorities in terms of implementation of the INFF includes the Gambia prioritizes strengthening leadership and coordination for effective INF implementation through reporting by the Minister of Finance and Economic Affairs to Cabinet's high-level economic social council, ensuring enhanced coordination, oversight, and timely decision-making, reinforcing leadership by strengthening country-level leadership on financing, aligning national strategies with global objectives, and addressing institutional coordination and bottlenecks, expanding a tax base by addressing stagnation in the tax-to-GDP ratio, improving compliance and leveraging digital tools, streaming tax exemption to drive growth in productive sectors and monitor tax expenditures for high-quality FDIs, enhancing private investment frameworks to attract sustainable FDIs and foster a conducive environment for impactful investment, maximize ODA impact through improved coordination, transparency, and alignment with national priorities, strengthen the Gambia Strategic Review Board for optimal funding mix, harnessing diaspora finance by leveraging diaspora remittances for national development, reducing transfer costs, and promoting investment through the diaspora desk, strengthening multi-stakeholder engagement by emphasizing inclusivity and collaboration in INF operationalization process, Gender equality by identifying gender-sensitive priorities, mainstreaming gender considerations, and including funding to support initiatives that promote gender equality and addressing gender-based violence. Based on our experience, we recognize that as we move forward with the INF approach, our financing priorities are clear. We need to mobilize resources to address food security and poverty while investing in productive capacity to drive economic growth. The Gambia is committed to advancing sustainable development through the INF framework. We anticipate productive discussions and continued collaboration to drive progress in financing for development. International partners can play a crucial role in supporting our efforts to mobilize climate finance and reduce debt vulnerabilities. We need to work together to improve the global finance landscape and make finance more affordable and accessible. In our INFF, we have identified a pipeline of projects that align with our development and climate objectives. However, we need support from the international community to bridge the financing gap and reform the international architecture to become more conducive for countries such as the Gambia to realize its financing and sustainable development outcomes that we are all striving for. This could include concessional financing grants, innovation financing that could help us leverage private sector investment, capacity building, and technical assistance to support the government's efforts to mobilize resources and implement policy reforms. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Binto. Fantastic to hear the experience from the Gambia. You talked about social protection tax, diaspora financing, sustainable FDI, and how you're using the INFF approach moving forwards to apply these areas of financing to address food security, poverty reduction, productive investments, climate finance, and resilience. So let me turn now to our final speaker on the panel, to the European Union, and to Antti Karhunen, Director for Sustainable Finance from DG INPA. Antti, the European Union has been a long-standing champion of country-led INFF since the Addis Ababa Action Agenda was agreed, and is a founding partner to the INFF facility. The EC is also leading innovative work through its Sustainable Finance Advisory Hub, scaling up investment through the Global Gateway. So can you tell us about the EC's support and engagement with INFFs to unlock and to mobilize sustainable finance and your priorities for FfD4? Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. And I really would like to start by thanking our Ethiopian host and Minister Seseva for making the meeting possible, and also your intervention where you shared us how you are working on the INFF, and I think that really shows how INFFs can help Ethiopia increase the resilience and contribute to the implementation of SDGs. So that's really much appreciated. Indeed, we have been supporting the INFFs in the EU from the very outset, and we do appreciate UNDP's work, Tim, on promoting this and supporting also the countries concretely on the country INFFs. So how do we see the role of the INFFs? For us, the country-led integrated national financing frameworks are really an essential building block for accelerating progress towards the SDGs and climate goals. And I think what we just heard from our Gambia colleague clearly and very nicely shows this. We need holistic and long-term financing strategies if we are to establish more adaptive and predictable and robust financing approaches to achieve the SDGs and to manage the risks. And as today, a great deal of the major global risks are, in fact, environment-related, it's imperative that the climate and biodiversity considerations are also integrated into the financial flows and policies and actions. So there is more than ever a need for financial strategies to mobilize and align a wide range of financing sources, public and private and domestic and international, to address countries' needs and deliver on our global climate and biodiversity commitments and the SDGs. And it's also the case for the 2030 Agenda's principle of leaving no one behind and giving a particular attention to women and girls and the youth and the future generations in decision making. So here we think that INFFs can set the path for mobilizing the needed resources. Of course, public finance has a very important role to play, in these efforts, but will not be sufficient, and therefore mobilizing private capital for inclusive and sustainable transition will be crucial to deliver on the SDGs and to address the widening global investment gap. So how can we as EU embed and be helpful with regard to INFF? The EU, with the Team Europe spirit, is working in the partnership mode with our partner countries, and we are implementing our Global Gateway strategy together with our partners, and that's our key vehicle to address the SDGs and the global investment gap. So the idea is to attract the private sector and accelerate the flow of private finance towards sustainable investments globally. And Global Gateway, whilst we are focusing on infrastructure investments, we are also very much looking into a 360 degrees approach to the enabling environment. And this is where the INFFs very usefully come in. We can deploy our toolbox both on investments and on enabling environment. And there, the INFFs really present a big opportunity to transform national financial systems. So as countries make progress with the INFFs and with the implementation of relevant financing reforms, we as the EU stand ready and can come in to help and support, engage with partner countries in areas like domestic resource mobilization or taxation reforms, promoting good governance, and scaling up sustainable finance. And perhaps indeed a few words about sustainable finance, as we see that an increasing amount of INFFs have a strong component linked to sustainable finance and mobilizing private financial flows at scale towards sustainable investments. So the EU has put in place a toolbox on innovative financial instruments to facilitate access to finance, such as blending and guarantees. And some of these instruments are really very directly designed to attract sustainable finance. A showcase example is the Global Green Bond Initiative, which is a Team Europe initiative to boost green bond markets in EU partner countries. So how does it work? By acting as an anchor investor, the Global Green Bond Initiative will support green bond issuers, especially first-time issuers, and aim to attract additional private investment to each green bond issuance. And also, together with member states, our EU member states, the DFIs, the UN organizations, and other partners, we also try to meet the rapidly increasing demand for technical assistance and support sustainable finance in a coherent and coordinated manner through what we call a Sustainable Finance Advisory Hub. And this is all about supporting partner countries on building necessary sustainable finance frameworks, the regulatory environment, the policy environment, and very much in the space of the enabling environment. So we also are working on policy. We recently received recommendations from a high-level expert group on sustainable finance that we had set up, and we are now these are, by the way, available, these recommendations. We are very happy to distribute them to anybody who is interested. And we are then working on an EU strategy in the future to scale up sustainable finance in low and middle income countries based on these recommendations. So just to close, for the FfD4, we really think that INFFs should find a prominent place there. If we are saying that all sources, public and private, domestic and international, will need to be mobilized, then this is very much at the core of the INFF. And it's also at the core of the partnerships that we want to promote with our partner countries. So really hope that INFF find themselves into the FfD process very prominently. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Antti. You talked about the role of INFF setting a pathway for mobilizing resources, public and private, and the work that the EU is doing through the Global Gateway, the high-level expert group on sustainable finance, and the Sustainable Finance Advisory Hub. This brings our panel to a close. We've covered an awful lot of ground. INFFs are a comprehensive approach, and we've talked about a very wide range of topics here, hearing from the experience of Ethiopia, the completion of their financing strategy and the way the INFF is being used moving forwards, that from Nigeria, how the reforms are being implemented under their financing strategy, and how the Gambia is using its INFF moving forward for development and climate priorities. We've heard from Spain as host of the FfD conference, from CEDA and the EU as partners supporting these country-led INFFs, and from DESA, who provide methodological and technical support as countries implement the INFF approach. We've covered a lot of ground, and to help us just make sense of all of the conversation that we've had and to place it also within the wider conversation over yesterday and today and the rest of this week, we're going to have some closing remarks and reflections from two colleagues. So let me first welcome Zalika Paulos, who's the Social Policy Specialist from UNICEF Ethiopia, to share your closing thoughts. Please come up.
Thank you very much, State Minister of Finance, Semerete Swaso, distinguished panel members, and ladies and gentlemen. We've heard very strong cases for why we are investing so much time and energy in INFFs, because they do work. And thanks to the Ethiopian government, represented by State Minister, we've also heard UNICEF's, the Ethiopian government's lead and, active, tangible exercise in bringing this into presence, although we're at the beginning stage, with a very, ambitious and yet very important role of bringing us all together. Because unless we're integrated, unless we're partnering, we can't really achieve change, all of us working in silo. So with that background, we're very grateful to also hearing the different dimensions of, leading development partners, other countries that have gone further in the roadmap with tangible results and examples for us to follow and also share in. So in very, in a very summarized manner, I'm here to also represent UNICEF, and maybe for those who are not familiar, you may wonder, why are we presenting some closing remarks? And UNICEF comes in as a member and a co-technical lead in the INFF facility, but also very much present in countries as a strong partner in country programs across the globe, very much present here in Ethiopia as well, partnering with the Ethiopian government, UN agencies, as well as development partners. UNICEF is a game changer in its comparative advantage areas, which its comparative advantage is bringing the social sector financing dimension with its existing work. It has very active engagement in public finance across its programs, and very much again present here in Ethiopia. Strong international and national partnerships, including with CSOs, deep technical research and operational partnerships with international financial institutions. But then again, above all, I think it's, its leading experience in local governance focus, be it with the FDs or fiscal decentralization, but it's also its local presence on the ground. There are very many examples in terms of, our existing work as we try to contribute along with partners to these, high-level results that we want achieved. It can be from a range of, working on policies and strategies and linking that with financing, in the active work that we do as part of medium-term forecasting, supporting MTEFs, but in the case of Ethiopia, we have the macroeconomic fiscal framework, which we're supporting the Ministry of Finance with, citizen budgets and other, budget transparency and transparency and participation measures, It could be the large entry points we have in PFM, budget credibility, social budget analysis, PRs, supporting policy reforms, local level financing strategies, specifically for local governments, because a lot of the times what happens is we have these big frameworks at the macro level, at the federal level, but how do we actually bring it down to local governments, which are actually responsible for service delivery? So with our footprints on the ground through our field offices, we do have that level of engagement. And then maybe one other thing that I can point to is innovative financing, but really taking it to the ground. For example, in Ethiopia, we're piloting partnerships with the private sector, where we want them to come in and also finance and participate in, for example, a social protection program, whereby we're trying to link it with local banks, ensuring that coverage is not just temporary, but has a lasting exit pathway to empowering, creating jobs, and financing. And all of this done with active participation and donor coordination. So in summary, I think it's just to highlight that, yes, we are present, grateful for the great partnerships across all those presented here on the panel, with our social sector dimension and our physical presence on the ground. And at the end of it, I think really what we want to close with is ensuring that all of this great work that we're all committed to doing really ties down with service delivery. Because at the end of it, we're all in the business of ensuring that we want to touch lives. We want to transform lives. So be it at the macro level, of be it at the policy level or strategy level, at the end of the day, through sector engagements, what we want to do is we want to transform lives. Yes, UNICEF focus on children, but it's also because we do believe that investing in human capital in the social sectors, these children becoming future leaders, the engines of economic growth and productivity that we all strive to achieve and see in our countries, we just stand, and just to reiterate, that we stand as a strong partner, and we look forward to supporting the Ethiopian government and through our other country programs across the globe, all other partners and countries, and work very closely along with you all. So thank you very much, and we look forward to strengthened partnerships and active engagement. Thank you.
Thank you, Zulika. And let me now give the final word to our UNDP resident representative here in Ethiopia, Samuel Doe. And Samuel, please share your reflections and help us to make sense of all that we've heard in this discussion and what this means for the FfD4 outcome document next year.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Colleagues, Excellencies, it's really a pleasure to be here. Let me begin with a huge thank you to our State Minister of Finance and Development here in Ethiopia, our distinguished colleagues from the Gambia and Nigeria, of course, our partners who have helped us to enlighten us on some of the critical issues around integrated national financing frameworks. I have sat through the last 2 days, and all of us, I think, are deriving critical messages from what we are hearing, or what we've heard so far in the last 2 days. From my point of view, I have picked up 4 key messages so far that I would like to share with all of you. First, I've heard that emerging global challenges have widened the development financing gap. And that we've heard repeatedly over the last 2 days from the DSG and from even the Secretary General himself. The figures we are now hearing, in 2015, we all saw 2.5 trillion as the development gap. With emerging challenges we've seen over the last 9 years, this number has now gone to $4 trillion, a staggering figure. And I think that should govern us urgent, concerted actions from all of us. This is the time to govern us global solidarity on the agenda that we have before all of us. We've also heard many calls for increased domestic revenue mobilization, increased mobilization of private capital, the scaling up of multilateral development banks financing. These are the right calls, but this is critical for all of us to begin to mobilize around these calls. We advocate for domestic financing mobilization, but let us remember that every context is different, and we've heard that from the three countries that have spoken to us. The unique challenges each country has to be part of our thinking in the global support that we mobilize for these countries. The opportunities to mobilize and to effectively invest different types of capital, the challenges and hurdles to getting there, and the institutions and capacities to implement reforms. These are unique from country to country. The second message that is emerging is that leadership and political will is an accelerator to the mobilization of development finance. The Addis Ababa Action Agenda Declaration opens by emphasizing that each country is responsible for its own development agenda, though of course this needs to be within a conducive international environment. What I see in the INFFs that have been presented today is the power of country-led approach to financing sustainable development in complement to the reforms needed in the international system. We've heard from the three countries on the panel that they are advancing reforms that are not only unlocking new finances, but enhancing the sustainable development impact of existing financing frameworks and opportunities in their respective countries. And yesterday, our administrator highlighted that this is something we are seeking to grow, to scale up across countries. Recent analysis of most advanced reforms in 17 countries found 16 billion in new finance, which also has leveraged about 32 billion United States dollars. So there's a momentum there, and there are possibilities to catalyze the mobilization of financial resources for development across a number of countries. And that we've heard from Nigeria, the Gambia, and Ethiopia. The third message is more and more efforts are aligned to make finance work for people, for planet, in an integrated ways. We've spoken a lot about development being in crisis, climate being in crisis, nature being in crisis. Finance is central to the solutions that are required to address these problems. But it also makes sense to invest $1 in development, another $1 in climate, and another $1 in nature. And that is why the integrated financing framework is absolutely important for our conversation around financing development. So it's heartening to hear from the countries today that integrated financing frameworks are driving toward an integrated approach to financing, with financing strategies that advance the national development plans, the sustainable development goals, as well as with the nationally determined contributions from these respective countries. The final message is, and I think Eric also highlighted that, is the centrality of partnership. We've heard from the partners on the panel how they are advancing and aligning their efforts behind country-led approaches across the globe. And I think this is what this conference is about, and that is what Spain next year will be about. How do we mobilize and govern our solidarity? How do we strengthen partnership? Because it is through this concerted effort we will be able to make a dent in the challenge or the challenges ahead of us. So let me say a huge thank you to all of the panelists and to all of you for joining us this afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Samuel. And we'll close here. Let me say a great thank you to the State Minister, to the USG, to our panelists, and thank you all for joining us this afternoon. This is a conversation that we look forward to continuing as the process leading up to the conference next year progresses. Let me draw your attention, just as we close, to three things. There were a couple of reports that were mentioned during the panel, so you might see a few of these outside on the tables. There's the guidance on SDG sovereign bonds, some more in-depth analysis on INFFs. Do please check those out. And let me also draw your attention to another special event that is just about to start just across the hallway there on solutions to the current sovereign debt crises. to restore growth, which is starting just now in meeting room 3. So thank you all for joining us this afternoon. We look forward to continuing the conversation, and we'll close here. Thank you.